Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, we've got Ryan Schollan on the podcast, our esteemed guest. Ryan is awesome. I met him at Champions last year. Super cool guy, and we're super excited to have him on. Ryan's background: he is a sports scientist by trade. He started his own company, G Science, which was acquired by Adamus Esports. Since then, he's been a performance coach with teams that you love: 100 Thieves, Excel, Red Bull, and most recently, Fnatic. And so we're super excited to have you on the podcast, Ryan. Maybe my first question for you would be, what's something you've changed your mind on in the past year?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on, Tim and Adam. It's great to be on here, and I'm excited to have this conversation today. Something I've changed my mind on, this is a funny one: morning routines. So, I used to be a big believer in that you should get up, start your day with meditation, journaling, ground yourself, those types of things. Whereas I've now changed my mindset into believing that it's actually far more productive just to get up and get straight into your work. And the
Hmm.
reason behind that is the whole point of doing those other activities is to try to set your mind up for flow or inducing a flow state. But the research actually goes to say that whenever you just come out of that sleep period and you're starting to wake up, your brain waves are actually more similar to that of a flow state. So within the first 5 minutes, it's actually better to get stuck into very deep work because you're able to get into flow more seamlessly and then use those types of activities to recover from the deep work. So that's something I've actually changed recently in the last 6 months or so. And I actually found that out from a guy called Rian Doris. He's an Irish guy who leads up the Flow Institute in California. So yeah, really
Yeah.
interesting research because I'm a big nerd, as you probably know, about neuroscience and productivity and anything around cognitive performance. So that's something that I've changed recently and really had a massive benefit from.
Okay, cool. So you've been rolling out of bed and then immediately doing some like heavy work stuff? Like that's been the change for you?
What I do is I get up, I'll drink some water first, have a coffee, and then kind of get stuck into 90 minutes of work. And then after that, I'll sit out my back garden here where I've got a beautiful little patio area and I'll get my sunlight. Sometimes as well, I like to ground, not all the time. Grounding is literally just like taking your shoes off, walking on the grass. So I'll do like 5 minutes of grounding, some stretches, drink my coffee, and then have my food. And then usually I'll do another bit of work and then go train midday. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Rian Doris is the co-founder, I believe, with Stephen Kohler stuff or
Correct.
Kotler. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
I did read one of his books, so that makes sense. That's good. Um, I thought that was interesting. I don't really hear people talk about that, so
Yeah, when I watched the video on it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense, but not a lot of people think about it that way because you always hear about, people have all these routines, and I mean, another guy from the sales world, Alex Ramosi, he talks about just getting up, no distractions, plan your day the night before, and just go in and get stuck into that work and try to get that first block of deep
Hmm.
work done. So that's another person I like to follow as well when it comes to kind of productivity.
do you work with teams with that? Like, is that something that you try to push teams to do or players to do?
No.
It's just purely
Okay, so
personal.
this
No,
is
no.
for you.
Yeah, that's honestly just for me. And when I'm in the team environment, it's not very practical. It's easy for me to do that when I can control the environment and control my schedule when I'm working remotely. But when you're in the team environment, it just totally depends on where we're at in the season, how it's been structured, who I'm working with, what the accepted kind of patterns are.
It's so interesting you wouldn't have that level of input. Like, you hear about like the Korean teams where they live in a house and it's like super structured and they've like, is that not the case with like a Western team that you've worked with?
Oh no, I mean it is. So every example that I will speak of today is very different and context is very important.
Sure.
So obviously it's going to be different. A Fnatic versus 100 Thieves or the remote coaching gig I did with Excel. They're all different contexts. So one of the first things that I do is I conduct a thing called a gap analysis. And the gap analysis involves a series of interviews with leadership in the org, the coaching staff, and then the players. And then on the back of that, we at Adimas score those teams on their culture, leadership, health, mental performance, and operations. We then have a pretty good understanding and a picture of what are the biggest gaps in this team right now. And it means that when we go to engage with the team, we can start to look at what's high priority, medium priority, and low priority. And if we focus on certain things now, will that give us the biggest result that we need for that team in that moment, right? So we're looking at how do we generate the most impact. That also varies due to the time of season. Like, for example, with the 100 Thieves there and the LA Thieves, they could have optimized their culture, but because we were on Major 4 and Major 5 and we were literally 6 weeks away from the end of the season, it made no sense to go back to square one. So we then
Mm,
focused on communication, trust, and confidence. And that was
mm.
the thing that really helped us, perform well at champs. So when you ask that question, Tim, it's very different with every team, but
Okay,
structure is always something that is lacking within esports orgs, and especially with coaches. They may be
sure.
great tactically in game, but they typically lack a lot of structure and processes.
These are more questions that I'm curious for me because I was a player or an aspiring player, and I never really like prioritized these things. Like if you were to like, I guess, say what is more important than the other, or maybe there isn't one. Is like mental more important than physical? Is physical more important? Does that even really matter in the context of esports because we're just sitting on a computer playing video games?
Let me ask you a question. So, when you looked at in game performance through your lens, how did you prepare for games? Like, what was your preparation and practice? What are the things that you focused your time and energy on?
So, I mean, it's more so like in-game stuff. When I was playing, it was like, how are we going to approach the map? Like, what do you want to do, an XYZ thing? And then obviously like anything individual, like in terms of mechanics or making sure like I'm in form. But I never really optimized like physical aspects in terms of like my health, and I never optimized my mental health in terms of like how I spoke to myself and maybe even how I spoke to my teammates.
Yeah, I think that's a really common experience. And the reason I asked you that question is that when I have these conversations with players and teams, they can typically tell me in a lot of detail what their plan is when it comes to in game performance, right? And when I look at performance, I look at 5 pillars. So there's tactical, there's mechanical, the two in which you just spoke about, and most players and teams spend 95%, if not 98% of their time focusing on.
Right.
But then you have 3 other pillars, which most people neglect, which is psychological, which is your mental, your physiological, which is your sleep, nutrition, and physical health. And then finally is social. And social is all about the environment and you as a teammate. What I find really fascinating when I speak with players and teams is when you're a competitor, what you're trying to find is edges, right? You're trying to find extra percentages. But if you look at the people at the elite level, like they're all pretty cracked in game, right? Mechanically, they're all pretty good. Especially these youngsters coming up, they're insanely talented, right? If you speak to most pros, they can tell you in a lot of detail, like how they're going to play the map. They understand their agents well, right? We understand our set plays and how we want to do retakes and all these different things. But when you start to ask players about, okay, well, how are you going to do that under pressure? What happens when you lose a really key gunfight? Where does your mind go? What's your sleep schedule look like? Oh, it's interesting you're feeling tired every single day. What's your sleep, nutrition, and physical training like? So what you find is a lot of the time they're missing the 3 pillars, and it's actually the 3 pillars that then impact your ability to execute on that game plan, execute in your mechanics, because you're not setting yourself up for success. The way I always see it is get a health bar of 100 points, right? Imagine you're going into that game where permanently throughout that game you've only got 60 HP. You're going into every single fight with a disadvantage. And that's the way I see out of game performance. If you're not optimizing your sleep, if you're not nailing your nutrition, your hydration, your caffeine optimization, if you're not physically fit and healthy and getting enough blood flow to the brain and making sure you're taking care of your body, you're going into these games with a disadvantage because your mind's going to be slow. Because
Mm,
you're not sleeping properly, your zone of tolerance is going to be much smaller. So things in game might piss you off and you're going to just go out of that zone way quicker and tilt way quicker than you would if you were well rested and had a larger zone. And ultimately, it comes down to where do you spend your time and energy? Because wherever you spend your time and energy, that's where the results will come from. Mental or physical, both are very important. In my opinion, I would say that you got to look at the body as a complex system. Everything is connected, mind, body, and soul. I'm a big believer in that as well, right?
mhm.
I feel like most players, even at the elite level, are missing so many percentage points. And if you connect the mind body and bring yourself into the game where all the systems are firing, and 100% all the cylinders are pumping, then you're going to be a different beast.
What would that look like?
Well, I mean, where do you want to go? Like, let's chat about this if you don't mind being a bit
Yeah.
personal.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I love this. So maybe we can start with one of the pillars. Like, where do you start on that psychological piece? Like, how do you help players work on their mental, both in game and out of game?
Player interviews are really interesting, right? I always say to players that I can't coach you, Adam, if I don't know you. So for any coach-athlete relationship to be successful, we've got to have a level of trust between us. And trust takes time to develop. But ultimately, what I say to players from the start is really simple. You have an Everest that you want to climb in your life. right? You may want to get the champions or be the best player in the world in your position, whatever that may be. Maybe you want to go pro, right? My role as a performance coach is to simply give you the knowledge, the support, and the skills to walk that path. But the key thing here is that I can't walk it for you. The most important thing when I work with players is I need them to take ownership of their journey. I need them to get into that mindset where they're in a growth mindset and they're open to feedback, they're open to challenge, they're open to taking these difficult steps and trusting the process. Trusting that there is a clear process to get you to that goal, but you've got to be disciplined enough and got to want it enough to walk the path with me. So that's step one. It's like really setting our relationship and our boundaries from the start, because I have another saying in coaching that I'm going to quickly deviate from the path here and come back. When I'm looking at a team, there's a rule of thirds in coaching. So in that team or in that environment, there's typically going to be a third of people who really love mental performance, who really buy into performance coaching, right? And they want to hear everything. They're the people asking the questions in the workshops. They're the ones coming to speak to you at the end or sending you the Discord messages following up for more homework and resources. The next third are the people on the fence. They can kind of take it or leave it depending on what mood they're in. Sometimes they might see value, but other times they're like, this is not really for me. And then the third of people just won't engage. They believe that the old way is the best way. I'm just going to grind the game. I'm just going to shoot bots, tap heads. And that's their philosophy, right? For each of those people, you got to use different techniques to get them on board. But it always comes down to like showing value, showing that you genuinely care about this individual that you're working with, and showing that you're here to understand them. You're here to listen to them about what they actually need. So a lot of the fundamentals of the relationship at the start between us, Adam, would be help me understand you, help me understand where you want to go. And then what we do is we get very practical. So I need to understand, what does your performance mindset look like? Are you even aware of what a performance mindset is? So what we explore is a thing called a high performance mindset. So a really interesting question to ask. I'm going to ask you right now, actually, because it's going to be a fun exercise here. We can coach live on stream. Question I always ask players is, when you're playing at your best, Adam, tell me what that looks like, what it sounds like, and what it feels like in game. And create a story before you actually answer this. I really want you to make this real. Like if you're playing out a round, make it real. Tell me detail. Tell me what you're doing. Like really bring me into that moment with you.
Okay. So if I'm playing at my best and I'm on, I'm just playing a tournament, I know it's going to look like I'm really like dialed in my facial expressions. Like I'm just, I'm not really making different facial expressions. I'm kind of just looking at the screen. It would look like my setup is going to be a little bit more comfortable. I look comfortable. I don't look tense. I look playing a little bit more relaxed. What it sounds like is I'm talking a lot. I find that when I play the best when I'm talking, and when I don't talk, I shut down. And then what it feels like is probably the best way I can describe it is like when I'm in flow, when I'm playing well, is like I don't really feel much, in the sense that like I don't get too angry or I don't get too sad over rounds. Like it's just like what's next, and I'm just like in the moment, I would say, is the best way to explain it.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you've touched on some really interesting points there. We're gonna talk about that term later on. What's next? When we chat about a bit about team communication and protocols, that's a really important term. So we'll chat about that in a bit. So that's really good. Okay, so you've got a pretty good awareness of when you're playing at your best. What does that look like? Now, if you think about it from a player's perspective, your goal is to play at your best consistently. Now, the question we've got to ask ourselves is, what do we control in that process? How do you give yourself the best chance, Adam, of playing at your best consistently?
You gotta like get rid of any external factors. So like any doubts or any worries, I would say I need to address those before I get into the server.
Okay, good. So you're aware of some of the things that might take you away from being able to reach that high performance mindset, right? Self-doubt, negative thoughts or worries. So that's great. The work that we would do together is we address that gap. So you want to be here in your flow state, in your high performance mindset. And we usually call it a name like Adam whatever, right? You being your elite self, that unbelievable version, right?
Right.
When you're unable to transfer, let's say your scrim performance to on stage, we explore that gap and we start to understand, okay, well, if we know Adam can play at this level and he's shown it before and he's aware of what it is, then we need to look at your process. And then what we do is we go across all those pillars and we really, really profile first of all. So when you profile, it's a really simple exercise, right? So one of the fundamental skills of performance is self-awareness. You can only move forward if you understand where you're at and you need to create feedback loops. So understand where you're currently at, understand your strengths and weaknesses, make a plan for where you want to get to, and constantly have feedback loops to make sure that whatever intervention that we're doing, we're testing, making sure we're getting the progress that we want, and retesting. And that's how it's an iterative process. So what we would do next is we'd say, okay, cool. We know what it looks like when you're playing your best. So let's break your process down across the pillars. And we would basically do an exercise where we look at mechanical, tactical, psychological, physiological, and social. We'd maybe pick 3 to 5 skills. So what does a world-class player or world-class performer look like across those categories, right? So then, if you look at something like psychological, someone who's got the ability to bounce back after setbacks, that's a really important skill, like resilience. Someone who is an incredibly good communicator, right? That's another really good skill. So you would basically take all these skills across all these categories and you'd rank yourself out of 10 first, because we need to know where you're starting at. 10 out of 10 is world class, 1 out of 10 is absolutely bronze level, right? If not lower. And then you would do that exercise yourself. And then usually what I do is I get the coach to do it as well and see where the disparity is. See if there is a lineup between how you view yourself and how maybe your teammates and the coach views yourself as well. But once we have that, we then have a good starting point. Then we can look at your block of training and say, okay, that gap right now between you being at this elite level and playing, consistently, we think it's these things. Let's focus the next block of training. Maybe it's your mental. We're going to focus simply on negative thoughts. You talked about some self-doubt and worry. We're going to focus on automatic negative thoughts. When do they occur? Pre-game, during the game, after the game. And we're going to do a specific block then on one-to-one mental performance. And I'm going to give you the tools to be able to do some cognitive restructuring. When you have those negative thoughts, we reframe and create positive affirmation, which keeps you in a confident state and helps you get back into that zone. So that's how we would do it. Like the process, you do your initial chat, build trust and rapport. Then you basically understand where you're currently at. What does that look like? Where you're currently at now, where's that gap? And then we start identifying, okay, what are the things you need to work on to bridge that gap?
Ryan, what would be an intervention you would do for, because I think that's super common, is that like when you make a stupid mistake in the game and you like just beat yourself up for it for multiple rounds. Or the other flip side is just getting tilted because someone else on your team made a stupid mistake. What is the tactical mental advice you would give players to try to intervene for themselves?
Yeah, so let's take Adam again. Okay. We're gonna work on you today, Adam. It's gonna be so much fun.
This is perfect.
Yeah. So I mean, I literally experienced this the last time I worked with LA Thieves. One of the ways to look at self-talk is what we say to ourselves is obviously incredibly important, right? Because if we're speaking to ourselves in a negative way, it's going to erode our confidence. If we speak to ourselves in a positive way, it's going to build our confidence, right? Really simple things. If we go into in-game, the first thing I would do is I would ask you a question, Adam. I would say, okay, I want you to tell me, first of all, what are your mental moments in a game? And this could start pre-game as well. So we could say, what are your mental moments in your esport? So you could say, I have a mental moment where I get really anxious, I get really nervous for a tournament. You can actually tell me, what is a mental moment for you? And a mental moment, Adam, is something that takes you away from that high performance mindset, something that might create self-doubt, something that would make you feel maybe slightly insecure, slightly nervous, anxious about your performance. What are some of those mental moments pre-game, during the game, and after the game?
Oh man, this is like, looking back on it, this is probably like one of the biggest things that I think held me back. But I've had some time to self-reflect on this. So before the game, it's always like, how am I feeling? Like, I always have like this weird self-doubt, like right before a match, when it comes to like my like physical state at that time. Like, am I tired? Am I angry? Am I hungry? Like hunger was a huge thing for me. And like that, as soon as like I am aware of anything of something like that, immediate self-doubt. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to play well. I'm gonna be off my game a little bit. I'm gonna let my teammates down. So pre-round, that happens a lot, just like physical stuff. During the match, I always had these like gaps, like if we lost a round and it was like in a macro thing, completely fine. But if we lost a round and it felt like it was my fault, or like I played the situation poorly, or I didn't know what else to do, like it felt like it was on my responsibility, I'm completely shut out for like 2 or 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't utilize timeouts well. One round in particular, it like comes up a lot is, I don't know, Breeze isn't part of the map pool, but I vividly remember me jump spotting mid on A site. Like there's like that little railing in water, and I'm spotting mid, and I'm just jump spotting, and this guy just walks up mid and one taps me, and I'm like, well, obviously I'm doing something wrong. And then we like ended up losing that round. We ended up losing the next round because of money. And then like when I looked back at the match history, that was the key round. And I remember thinking after my death, I didn't know what else I should have done there. Like, I'm spotting mid, this seems to be the right play, but obviously it's something wrong. So in general, like basically like mistakes that I don't know how to solve in the match, huge mental gap, and like I get stuck in that spiral. And that post match, I mean, I think the easiest one is just looking at your stats. Like, I compared my performance a lot to my peers. The person that I built my team with, his name is Bobovo. I looked up to him a lot, and he looked up to me a lot, and we were kind of like co-IGL, co-captain type of thing. Like, it was just me and him, like, against the world type of thing. And he was very good in the mental side of things. So when he performed and I didn't, I felt like I was holding him back. And it wasn't the case like in opposite. Like, if I was doing well and he wasn't doing bad, or sorry, if I was doing well and he was doing poorly, he would champion my like performance. Whereas like if it was vice versa, like of course I would champion him, but I also felt like I was putting myself down.
I hear you. Well, thank you for sharing that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go backwards. So we'll go post game first.
Okay.
So stats are really interesting. I love stats, and I can tell you a wee story about Boaster. So Jake is obviously one of the most experienced players in the game, and he won't mind me saying this. You know, we would have a lot of chats around that kind of negative self-talk, because he would come away from some games and he would be like bottom of the leaderboard, right? He'd have really bad stats, and he would get so negative about it and so frustrated that he's, you know, he feels like he's losing it, and all these negative thoughts would come in. But I would ask him a question very similar to you, Adam. Like, what's your role in the team?
To make sure everyone's playing cohesively.
Okay, so pin that there. So if everyone is playing cohesively, how does that reflect on the leaderboard?
Probably even. Like, everyone's doing relatively equal.
Okay.
Maybe one player's doing better than another.
Okay, so the role of an IGL in the team is that you are setting up the team for success, right? You're microing the team, you're macroing the team, right? Your goal, or what success looks like for you, is very different to what success looks like for the top player in the team, right? If we take a Durka, an entry player, or a Leo in our team, right? Success for each player across Valorant massively depends on their position in the team. If you're an IGL, success for you is, can you outdiff the other IGL? Can you get the tactical game plan right? Communicate effectively as a leader, control your team to the best of your ability, and execute those skills under pressure when it matters most. That is what success looks like, because if you set your team up, and I call it POMO, your position of maximal opportunity, you create positions of maximal opportunity by getting good reads in game, by having good strategies. When you put a player in a position of maximal opportunity, it's over to them to secure that moment or win that moment through their mechanical skill and all, you know, everything else. But your goal as an IGL is to put your players in the position so they can make the plays. So for me, when I look at an IGL's performance, I don't look at their stats. I look at, how did you call today? When we were behind, how did you rally the guys? Did you do the breath work in the round and reset everyone and then say, what's next, right? Were you objective and goal orientated, or were you allowing self-doubt and worry and negativity to creep in? When the comms drops, were you aware of the comms dropping? When another player dropped into their low performance mindset, were you aware and were you able to help that person come out? That's the role of a leader in a team. It's to be the commander. It's to provide direction, to provide support. It's to provide clarity on what we're doing and how we want to go about it, right? And we're going to talk a bit about the high performance mindset here, because that's one of the final pillars: intention on the map. So a reframe for you maybe is, success for you is not about stats, right? A great IGL, and we've seen it with Boaster, sometimes Boaster doesn't have the best stats, but he's considered to be one of the best in the game tactically, because how he prepares prior to the game is very much about, how can I make sure that I outdiff the other IGL? And he does a lot of aim training as well, so he can still win his key moments when it matters. But you see how that reframe can be slightly different there. So when you look at the leaderboard, you're now asking yourself, my stats may be this, but how did I perform as an IGL today? And then it might leave you feeling more confident in yourself and your abilities, instead of having this and let me explain this very quickly. So there's a thing called the gap and the gain, okay? And the gap and the gain is a really simple model I teach when it comes to confidence and negative self-talk. So if you imagine, we're going to take a gym analogy here really quickly. If I took you into the gym, Adam, and I said, Adam, I want you to put on, I don't know, we're chatting to mostly probably Americans and Canadians here. So I want you to put on 150 pounds in the bar on the bench, right? I don't know, something like that. I want you to do as many reps as you can. And I say, Adam, today we're going to aim for 12 reps. You and I are doing it. I lift off the bar, right? Let's say you get 8 reps. It's pretty freaking good, right?
Yeah.
But because you are I don't want to say a perfectionist or a high performer who sets incredibly high standards for themselves, you get off the bench, you turn them in, you're like, oh man, I didn't get it, right? You're all down on yourself. You're looking at the reality of the 8 reps, your expectation of the 12, and you're saying, I'm in the gap right now, right? I'm feeling sorry for myself. I feel like a failure. I feel like I haven't achieved anything. This is so common for elite athletes or high level esports performers because they have such incredibly high expectations for themselves. They're often left feeling that they're not enough. Only one team can win a championship. Remember that. Only one team can win a championship. So there's 9 other teams, or 11 other teams sometimes who win nothing. Are they unsuccessful? I
Of
don't think
course not.
so. Right? I think that everyone's journey is very different, but the reality is, the sport is cutthroat. Only one person can win, or one team can win. So the reframe is this: count backwards. You got 8 reps. Hold, right? When you're in the game, what you're actually doing is you're looking backwards and saying, well, I started in 0 and I ended here, and that's pretty freaking good, right? When you're in the gain mindset, you feel more self-confident, you're goal-driven, you feel like you're achieving things and making progress, and you're not being self-critical hard on yourself. You're exercising self-compassion. You're saying, I'm not where I want to be yet. That's okay. I can have these goals I want to strive for, but I'm making progress. I'm only 4 reps away. And see, that mindset, it's so simple, but it's such a simple reframe, and it applies to everything in gaming as well. So we're going to go in and talk about a specific example here in game. So one of the things that always comes up for me is if a player misses a really easy 1v1, they absolutely whiff their shots, right? As you said, that can play on a player's mind, and it can make them have a lot of self-doubt. They might not put themselves in the position again to play against that other player and take the gunfight. So I say, okay, let's talk about it, right? So that's a mental moment for you. Where does your mind go? So a lot of people, what happens is you make the mistake, you shut down, the negative thoughts come in, are the ants, okay? Really important, write this one down, everyone. Automatic negative thoughts are ants. Imagine all the ants crawling in. Your goal as a high performer is to squash your ants as quickly as possible. Squash them little shit, right? You got to squash them. And how you squash your ants is this. The first thing you're going to do when you miss that shot is you're going to go, okay, acceptance. You did not purposely go out to miss that shot. And if you did, you're throwing the game for your team. But let's be honest, a lot of the time we're not trying to make mistakes, are we? We're always trying to show up and we're trying to execute, but sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's okay. Show me a player in the world that's never made a mistake. There's none. So first of all, you need to accept your intention was you tried, you failed. That's okay, right? Next thing is a bit of self-compassion then. So instead of that, think about 2 voices, right? One's the inner critic and one's your positive self-talk. Instead of that inner critic, now turning up the volume to 100%, being like, you're going to throw this game, we're losing this game now, it's all your fault, this one moment's lost us the whole game. You'll learn how to turn that down. And how you turn that down is by reframing, okay? So in that moment where you miss that shot, depending on where you go, some people go more brain, some people become more emotional. If it's a brain, you're going to say, okay, I tried, I missed. I'm going to create a positive self-talk or talk statement now, okay? So you might say to yourself, Adam, I'll get the next one. Don't worry, I'll get the next one. Right? Super fast. You don't even give the ant the chance to crawl into your brain, You say, or what you say is, I'm better than this guy. It's like, gas yourself up, and just really, like, it's so incredibly important. It's like, I'm going to take the next one, or I'll go for the next one. Because if the negative self-talk comes in where it's like, okay, I'm not playing well today, I'm missing my shots, I feel this, I'm within, then your confidence just goes down and down and down, and you're going to be playing not to make mistakes rather than playing to win. This is one of the most fundamentally important things. Please write this one down. When people make mistakes in game, or when the team's not playing well, you can see it in their gameplay. Their mindset shifts from, we are playing to avoid making mistakes because we don't want embarrassment, we don't want fear of failure. They change their mindset from playing to win. When you go on the back foot, that's when you're going to get steamrolled by a team that's confident. When you're playing to win, you're playing with confidence, you're playing with conviction, you're playing connected as a team. It's very important to get back into that mindset. So when you have the negative thought, it's acceptance, it's compassion. Don't be hard on yourself. Everyone makes mistakes. It's create a positive self-talk statement, okay? So for every time you have a moment in a game, it could be when you lose a round, when you whiff your shots, when something bad happens, write these all down on a piece of paper, okay? So exercise for everyone listening. Think about your game. Think about 5 mental moments, right? What are those moments that pull you out of your high performance mindset? Okay, there's difficult moments in the game. Then write down, how do you currently respond? We talked about there the thought, okay? So people get negative thoughts. To replace the negative thought, what you're going to do is you're going to squash your ant really quickly. Imagine you're squashing the ant, and then you're going to think positive self-talk statement, okay? So write down your positive self-talk statement. It could be, you'll get the next one, I'm a competent player, whatever it is, like put a statement in there that you can immediately switch to that keeps your confidence high. And then what happens next? I want you to breathe if you've got time. You're going to do a really simple thing called a tactical breath. And a tactical breath is something that will help you regulate your emotional state and then also your brain. Because if you go into a fight or flight mode and go into a stress state, or more importantly, what it's called is a threat mindset, the threat mindset kicks in, then you're gone. Because the threat mindset is the play to avoid making mistakes mindset. You want to reset yourself and then come out of that into what's next. What's the next thing I can do? What's the next key moment that I can get myself back into the game to make a positive contribution? Remind me to talk about this model in a bit, Tim, as well. The high performance model, right? Where it's momentum, mindset, and moments, but we'll chat about that in the team. And the last technique very quickly for negative self-talk is this 3-step model: spot, stop, shift. So when you're writing down those 5 statements, what you're doing, you're spotting the moments, you're aware of the moments that are going to take you into a negative headspace or a low performance mindset. The next thing you're doing is you're stopping. Imagine a red stop sign. You're stopping those automatic negative thoughts from taking action, right? Because remember this, thoughts come from silence. It's when you attach to them is when you give them life. When you attach to a negative thought of I'm weak today, then what happens next? You have an emotional response in your body and a physical response, which then is tension, tightness, anxiety, worry. And then that then has an outcome in your behavior, which is then you play slower, you play not to make mistakes. So if you can stop that process from happening, then you're already ahead of the game, right? You're stopping that from happening. And then the final thing is shift. Shift your attention and focus. Shift your mindset back into high performance mindset. And you do that through your positive self-talk statement. What's next? Control your focus by focusing on the next thing you can do to get back into the game. Are they useful techniques?
No, that is. I guess like a quick like clarification.
Yes.
Because I know when I'm in the moment, like I defaulted to like a physical reaction. So like I used to do this thing where I would slam my mouse or like I would put my hand on my face. If I want to interrupt that with the tactical breath first and do it in that order, tactical breath and then the squashing the ants, does that make any difference at all?
No, I think it's about understanding your unique process. So like if we were working together one-to-one, we would literally go through that. So when I asked you there, what is your mental moment and where do you go? Then we'd understand, is it more mind body with you or body mind with you? And then we can look at the process first. But if you feel rage or anger or frustration, a really good one to do is take your mouse hand off your mouse and keyboard, put your hands in your lap and just squeeze your fists. Just squeeze your fists, right? Because if you're showing physical signs of frustration and you're playing on stage, your teammate is going to freaking tilt them. And if I see that and I'm playing against you, I'm like, I'm so in Adam's head right now. And you're taking away an edge to me. And I know I've pissed you off. So I'm going to run. I'm literally going to run at you. And I'm going to try to break you mentally in game. I'm going to take 1v1s against you, especially if I'm the guy who killed you. So think about this. Body language is really important because it's like psychological warfare. Like I tell my Call of Duty boys, see when I make a big play, I want them up on stage screaming at the other guys. You know, I want that because I want them to get hyped because I know when they're hyped and excited, they're playing with confidence. Right? It's the same if you look at the sports psychology around penalty taking. When a team that scores celebrates, it puts more pressure on the next penalty taker from the opposition when he's going to take his, right? Really important things like body language is incredibly important. So in your moment there, Adam, what I recommend you do is either squeeze your fist to get it out of you, or when you feel that sensation, that energy in you, is you're going to hit a tactical breath. So you're just going to take your hands off the keyboard, ground yourself in the moment again, okay? Bring your focus back into your body, and you're just going to go like this, right? We're going to do it together. So hand on stomach, okay, hand on chest. And to do a tactical breath, you need to know how to do diaphragmatic breathing. And diaphragmatic breathing is just about, breathing through your stomach. But we can maybe send some resources if anyone's interested in this afterwards, okay? So how you do it is like this, okay? So the first inhale is one full inhale to about 95%. And then you're going to do a very short, sharp inhale again through your nose. When you've done that short, sharp inhale, then you're going to slowly breathe out for about 6 seconds, okay? So it's like this, you go. Try it. I want you to do 2 rounds of that, guys, right? So hand, stomach, hand and chest. Right, breathe in fully through your nose. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Pause. Now in again, short, sharp. And then breathe out through your mouth. And same again. So breathe in as much as you can up to about 95%, then small pause in through the nose, and then out through your mouth. And just relax. And imagine in that moment, Adam, if you do this on stage during a game, all that frustration and tension just melts away.
Mm.
Just melts away. Then I want you, now that you've regulated your central nervous system there, now I want you to think, what's next? Okay. What's the next thing that you can focus your attention on to get you back into the game? What's the next moment that you're going to take to get you back into the game? Okay. To build some momentum. It's
So
very,
you're
very
kind of like you're releasing and then you're getting present again.
100%. The most important thing is this, okay? When you're playing a game, you have an emotional toggle and a logical toggle, okay? And in order to find your optimal state, arousal state, you got to know, are you kind of like a cryo from 100 Thieves? You're just a bloody assassin, no facial expression, nothing really gets you going, you're just locked in. Or are you like a warrior, kind of like a Jake, like a boaster, when he makes a big play, standing up, he's getting everyone going, he's shouting. You got to know what your zone is,
Mm.
right? Warrior or assassin. And then if you're out of your zone, you've got to use different techniques to get you in your zone, because when you're in your
Mm.
zone, you're giving yourself the best opportunity to win those key moments and gain momentum, right? So
But I think
yeah,
it's so important, Ryan, that like a lot of what you're talking about is like we assume like we already understand ourselves really well. And I
yeah,
think what you're saying is we don't actually. And in
no,
fact, we're all actually like really maladaptive in many ways. Part of the
yes.
journey in game, out of game life is like actually understanding who we are, what makes us tick, and how do we make that work for ourselves.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we haven't even finished here. You're talking about when I work with a player. I've got a few more steps I want to tell you about, because we kind of went off into a bit of coaching there. But to your point, Tim, yeah, like the most important thing here is that you need to start, first of all, be self-aware as a player. That's why I'm
Mm.
getting you to ask these questions. Know your mental moments, know where you go and know where you want to go. Then you work with a performance coach to help you bridge that gap, right? They give you the strategies and the tools, like our spot, stop, shift, our squashing the ants, positive self-talk scripts. And then I just want to touch on the last one that you mentioned, Adam, just for people who are about to play competitive games on stage. Maybe it's tier 3, tier 2 level. You talked about your body and the sensations that you feel ahead of the game. So two things I want to challenge here. Sometimes we hold beliefs about ourselves that are simply not true. And I call these things limiting beliefs. So you've created a story and a narrative in your mind that if you're hungry, you're not going to play well. If you feel tired, you're not going to play well. I can guarantee you that if we look back throughout your whole performance in your career, we'll find multiple times where you were tired and hungry and you played really, really well. Right? But sometimes our mind likes to go to these places where we almost like tell ourselves before the events even happen how it's going to go. So we protect ourselves. It's like loss aversion, right? We protect our
Mm.
ego because we've already said, oh, these things happened. We've got external factors here. It's these external factors why I lost today, so it's okay. It's not about me. It's not that maybe I didn't work hard enough or I'm not prepared. It's about the external. So what I really like to do a lot of the times when I work with players is I challenge those beliefs and I simply ask you a question: is like, is holding that belief serving you? By you telling yourself that you feel that way, is that serving you? And if it is, if there's actually truth to this belief, like maybe it is about your nutrition and you're not fueling properly, well, let's look at it. Like, what can you do to control that? Can you eat a well-rounded breakfast? Can you take your caffeine at the right time? Can you go in feeling more ready? Or if it is physical sensations around maybe pressure, anxiety, or nerves, can we take those perceptions? Like Steph Curry says this, right? Before he walks on to the court, he feels butterflies in his stomach, but his mind goes to, this is my cue that I'm ready to perform. Some other people would be taking that as like, oh my God, I feel a bit off today. I'm feeling a bit nervous. I don't know how this is going to go. The best players in the world, the most elite athletes in traditional sports and esports, everyone feels pressure and nerves. The key thing is, though, it's how you perceive it. If you can get into the mindset of like feeling the high heart rate, the sweaty palms, is this is my opportunity to show everyone how good I am. I'm ready to perform. You're getting
Mhm.
your mindset into a challenge mindset. You're
Mhm.
approaching this challenge ahead of you and you're embracing what's coming. Whereas if you take all these things, it's like, oh, I'm not really feeling great today. I'm feeling a bit anxious, a bit nervous. Your mind goes into a threat state and then you feel out of control. You feel vulnerable. You feel scared and you're already in that kind of tense mode and you're not going to be able to play with freedom and play to your strengths because you're already in a performance state that's not going to allow you to play up here where you want to be. So the technique there for people who would actually want to, we can give some practical stuff, is it all comes back to self-awareness. Think about when you've prepared as a player here for a tournament online or in person that was a high stakes, high pressure for you, whatever level you're playing at. and just really reflect on, like, how did I feel? How did my body feel? Where was my mind? How was I thinking? What was the self-talk that I was using at that time? Really look at the mind-body approach before you went into that game, and then start challenging some of the beliefs and start saying, okay, some of them negative beliefs, let's call them, or limiting beliefs that were true. What can I control here? Can I prepare better for this? And if you can, take action. It's very, very important. And then most importantly is perception. These things are going to happen to us because we're putting ourselves into an environment where we feel out of control. When you step on a big stage on the international level, you're not in control anymore. You're in an environment where there's a live crowd, there's lights, there's an enemy team, there's an atmosphere. There's so many different things that can take your attention away and distract you. To be an elite level performer, you've got to be able, to your point, Tim, be present. It's all about controlling your attention and bringing yourself into the moment. And you can do that through different techniques like mindfulness practices, through body awareness, those grounding techniques. Adam, like if you
Mhm.
ever felt that in a game, you bring yourself back into the moment by squeezing, some body techniques. And then, yeah, and then finally as well, controlling your thoughts. Don't allow the ants to come in and have an infestation because then your mind's all over the show. You got to control your thoughts.
So in this mental aspect, I'd love to hear, Ryan, have there been players that have really impressed you with their like that they're naturally good at this? Or are
Yeah.
most players I could think of some players that are just naturally good at this, some players that become pro because they're just mechanically super gifted, but they're kind of struggle
Hmm.
on the mental side. Like w- um what comes to mind for you?
I mean, I can talk most recently about the Fnatic guys. Leo is, in my opinion, the most professional player I've ever worked with.
He's he looks cold as ice.
He is just a true professional. I mean, like how he approaches out of game and his discipline, like his work ethic, how he eats, trains, sleeps. Like he really does train, as I would call it, like a pro. Like he's first one in the office most days. You know, he's doing his routine that he knows is going to set him up for success. Like he's always really impressed me. And then I don't know, like how, if people would have watched this, but in the EMEA finals, not the one that they just won there, but the one we won previously when I was coaching the
Yeah.
boys, that was probably the most challenging 5 days of my life as a coach. The stress that we were under, the pressure that we were under, obviously being Fnatic, having won two out of the three
Yeah.
international tournaments a year before. Then when I came into that team, I knew it was a wee bit of a, I want to say a poison chalice, but I knew that when you're at the top in Everest, that's the death zone, right?
Yeah.
You don't stay alive long there. And to stay up there, you gotta have something pretty exceptional. You know, you gotta have a lot of oxygen. And a lot of times it's hard to go back to back. And I kind of knew that when I went in with these boys, it was going to be a massive challenge. And it proved to be so, right? We obviously didn't make Madrid first time round, or for the first international, and then we made it to Shanghai. But when you look at a player in those moments, we were under so much pressure. People were thinking that we dropped off. But
Hmm.
in the group, we really trusted and we believed. But what we had to do was we had to be honest with each other.
Hmm.
And the reality was that the boys weren't working hard enough. You know, it's very different when you don't have a big brand, when you're not on a big contract, right? When you haven't won a major, when you've done all that and you're living sweet, the
Yeah.
little edge you have, or the need to prove people wrong and prove yourself, that's kind of gone. So your
Yeah.
motivation has to be different. And one of the things I've written down here is when I work with a player, I need to understand what motivates you. Are you motivated extrinsically by money, by status, by trophies? Are you motivated intrinsically by the love of the game, mastery, wanting to be the best at your craft? That's a really important thing. So when we talked a bit about players' mindsets, you need to understand your high performance mindset. Then you need to understand your process and build out your script and your training protocol. But then you need to know what drives you. But with those boys in particular, I was so incredibly impressed that when our backs were against the wall and people were doubting us, the belief we had in ourselves and the
Mm.
players in the team and the mental resilience we had to come back. You've seen some of those crazy comebacks from 9-3 down, whatever.
Mhm.
It all comes down to trust and confidence and belief in the team, mental resilience, and having the mental techniques so that when they find themselves in a mental moment, we don't panic and that we can claw ourselves back in one round at a time.
What that's such an interesting thing around that momentum and that that resilience. Like, what are practical things that teams do to kind of rally themselves when they're down? Because like you feel like everything's not working. We can't
Yeah.
win around. Nothing's going our way. We're gonna stop calming. We're not, like, what do you do to keep the vibes up, or what do you do to turn teams around when they're in that state?
Yep. So it all starts with Adam, would you believe? It starts with a great leader. So you need to have a great leader in the team who's going to be aware of that and be aware of when people are dropping into low performance mindset and when their back's against the wall, and they need to be calm and be clear. When people are frantic and panicking, that's when you need someone to be very clear about, guys, this is what we're doing next. Okay, everyone breathe. And I'll tell you very practical skills that we use. So the first things first is we had to identify our mental moments. Why did we lose games? And that was the number one thing, self-awareness. As a team, why were we losing games? And this was, by the way, new for Fnatic because they hadn't lost in our home, or what was it,
Yeah, they
European.
hadn't been losing.
Like, they were not losing. So I said to the guys, and I was like, holy, like, I mean, do you know what was actually hilarious? They didn't even have a loss protocol for when after a game. They were so used to winning. There wasn't like, when we lose, what do we do? It was there was just an expectation to win, which I thought was insane, and it was great. You know, when we actually did lose, I was like, okay, this is interesting. So yeah, the first thing, Tim, is it's all about understand how do we lose, right? So identify the mental moments, understand where we go, and then we look at strategies once again. So very practically speaking, a lot of it comes down to communication. So what we looked at was, okay, what's everyone's role and responsibility in the team? So everyone had a very clear role and responsibility as to what they were bringing to the team. Like Alpha was our Joker, our vibe man. Leo was our micro kind of mid round caller. You know, Jake was obviously the commander and the macro caller. Kron was our glue man. And what I mean by that is, like, he was the guy that if our comms are dropping or someone dropped into low performance mindset, he was being like, hey, Turkey, you got the next one, dude. You know, trust yourself. Like, everyone had a very specific role in the team. So we
Mm.
were functioning very well to unit because everyone knew their role and responsibility. And then what we also did was a workshop around expectations. I would say, hey, Tim, I expect that under pressure, I can trust that you're going to keep me right. You know,
Mm.
sometimes I struggle where I get a bit headless. Tim, you're going to be like, hey, Ran, what's next? You know, or whatever it may be. So we really talked about in the group, what do we need from each other and what do we expect from each other in these key
Mm.
moments? So we built really deep levels of trust. And the other unique thing about this team is, like, they've been there and done it before. You know, they know what it's like to play under pressure. They know what it's like to come back. Like, people talk about that mad run against Loud. Like, they've done it under the highest
Mm.
pressure, so they know they can do it again. There's so much like strength and confidence that comes from that, because when you haven't done something before, it's really hard to trust yourself that you can do it because you haven't got previous performance accomplishments, right? So a lot of people look at vicarious experience. They watch other people do it. And they're like, hey, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Then you look at things like, you know, self-talk or emotional states and all and mental imagery. Like, you can imagine yourself doing it. But what I always say is success leaves clues. And the fact that we've done it before gave us so much confidence in those
Mm.
difficult mental moments that we could do it again. So then how did we do it? That was your question. So what we did was we identified the moments, then we built strategies. Really practical one is our 3-step framework is this. So your number one goal as a player, your number one responsibility is to compete in your high performance mindset, right? So we didn't actually talk about what is a high performance mindset. It's made up of 3 pillars, okay? Pillar 1 is awareness. You must be in control of your attention, your focus, and what you're scanning right on the map. Because in order to make good decisions in a game, how do you do that, guys? Question: how do you make decisions in a game?
You need the information.
Correct. You need the information, and everyone in the team has an important role to play. If you're like an alpha and you're playing out on your own, you're disconnected from the groups. You're not sure what's going on. You don't know when to move and do certain things. So it's really important that everyone is calming the basics. Say what you see. Talk about timers. Talk about, you know, tracking different alts and all those things. So everyone has super clear role and responsibility when it came to comms. We wrote down
Mm.
lists. Everyone had a match script. These are the key things that you got to say. This is the person who's tracking eco, this is the person who's tracking alts, this is the person who's tracking this, this, and this, right? Once again, roles, responsibilities, expectations, and clarity. Okay. Um, then yeah, in the game, it's really simple. So if we were losing, we would make sure that we get back to a high performance mindset first before we start making plays, right? So how do you do that? Everyone has to take responsibility. So, like, we just talked about that technique. Regulate the emotions. We might do that as a team. So we've just lost a really important round. Jake might say, guys, tap breath. Everyone does the
Mm.
tap breath. So now,
Everyone knows what it means.
yeah, everyone. So it's just trigger words, right? Then what we're talking about is we're maybe looking at, I can't remember the exact process now because it's been a while, but I think it was like next we were tracking, I think it was economy. Then we were
Mm.
tracking
What about else?
Yeah, probably, yeah, alts. And then I think it was, what are we doing then? What are we
Yep.
attacking? And
Yep.
then if anyone was unsure, like sometimes you said, Adam, you weren't sure what to do. You need to be in a team where you're confident enough to say, hey guys, I don't know what to do here. What should I do? And this all happens so quickly, by the way, because you only got,
Mm.
30 seconds. So you got to do
Yep.
this real fast. So we really try to focus on like not talking during the buy phases and making it like super, clear, because the amount of times you come into buy and everyone's like, I missed this, or why did you do this, or what were you doing last round? You're just wasting time. It's
Yep.
irrelevant
Right.
information, so you need to think about what's next. That's such an important trigger word, okay? So if there wasn't a clear call made within like 5 seconds left, the call would be, what's next, guys? What's the play? What's next? And then someone would call strat, usually Jake's, and be like, right, guys, we're going to do this. Or if someone had a really good read, they would be like, hey, we're going to do this, and like, let's play it on the fly kind of thing. So yeah, high performance mindset's number one. Regulate, communicate. They're two really important things. The next thing was, okay, the next part of the framework is you have your mindset, you have moments, you have momentum, okay? Now, if you're in a high performance mindset as a team, everyone's locked in. Like imagine you've got a brain here, the Fnatic brain or your Valorant team brain. There you go, it's beautiful. Everyone is everyone is linked into that. Okay.
Yeah.
We're connected. This is really important. We are connected as a team. We're communicating effectively. We're connected. We've got confidence and there's trust. That's the state you want to be in as a team. If you do that, everyone knows the next pillar now is in the high performance mindset is intensity. Okay. So in the intensity pillar, it's all about how are you calming. At the start of the round, it's very calm. It's very clear. We're waiting. We're phase checking. We're doing certain things, right? Then when we go, it needs to be super fast, clear comms, right? If you're pushing a site, if you're flashing in, the micro timings of like 3, 2, 1, we swing together,
Mhm.
everything matters. Everything matters, okay? So
Mhm.
that second pillar one is awareness and focus. We need to be aware of what's happening, aware of the information, feed it to the team to make good decisions. Two is our intensity. Okay, our emotional regulation as well is there, and our comms. Okay, being in your right zone, assassin warrior. The final thing is intent. So everyone on the map in the team should understand what they're trying to do. It should be goal directed behaviors. If I ask you like if I say a strat like one from our playbook, if I say, Adam, what's your goal here? You should be able to tell me what you're meant to be doing at that time. So the third pillar there is intent. You want to be positive and proactive on the map and be clear about what you're trying to achieve. If you're in your high performance mindset, you're doing those three things well, you've now given yourself the best opportunity so that when you get a key moment or a 1v1, you're in your POMO, right? The position of maximal opportunity. Then you're in the opportunity to win that key moment. If you win the key moment, guess what happens next? Let's say Durka comes in, he gets the entry, it's a 5v4. We've got momentum. This is really important though. We had a call called freeze and hold. If we got I'm maybe giving away too much information here. If we,
No, that's the Reddit meme is Fnatic manager goes delete this.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm giving it maybe away too much, but it's fine. I'm not there anymore, so it doesn't matter. So I said, yeah, what the call was at that time is a freeze and hold. So if we have
Yeah.
momentum, then
So you don't overheat.
correct. We have the advantage. Like if you get that first pick, you now control the pace of the round. So it's all about, okay, now the game state has changed. How do you respond to the game state? And that's where you need a really good micro
Mm.
caller as well. So like that's where Leo and Boaster worked so well together,
Mm.
being able to make those calls. So yeah, that's what it comes down to. And then
So high performance mindset, awareness and focus,
yes,
intensity, comms, intent.
correct, correct.
So I want to ask, you're no longer working with Fnatic. What's here? It's referencing ourselves. What's next for you?
Great question. I mean, I've been working when I left Fnatic. I immediately started working with the Call of Duty team over
Okay.
at 100T's. So we went from being ranked 8th and finished top 4 in champs, and that was another example of communication, trust, and confidence. And the
Mhm.
boys did really well. And I'm currently working with their LCS squad right now,
Okay.
which is a good challenge. What's next for me? I have no idea.
Mhm.
I'm technically going to be a free agent soon. So
Okay.
if anyone
So
wants to
where
work.
where if someone wants to learn more about you, they want to read more about what you're doing, like where would they find you, Ryan?
That's a great question, Tim. I don't really create a lot of content. I'm a wee bit of a
No.
ghost in this thing, you know.
Okay.
I kind of like allow my work to speak for itself. I am
Okay.
going to try to create a bit more content these days.
Okay. Can they
Um,
find you on? Are you on Twitter or LinkedIn?
yes, you can find me on Twitter, so it's at esports Ryan, and then on LinkedIn it's just Ryan Schollan. But I'm changing my coaching name to Coach Scully. So if you hear
Okay,
that,
Coach
Coach
Scully. Okay.
Scully is the new name.
Okay.
Coach Sky.
Well, Ryan, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Probably the biggest benefiter of this podcast, it sounds like, is Adam. Now he can address
Much
his mental
appreciated.
moments. He can level up. Like, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
having me
much.
on. And there's so much more, as you can probably tell, that we can go into.
We'll have a part 2 episode, Ryan.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to because I've got literally, I think we scratched about 20% of my notes here.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
anyway, no, thank you so much. And thank you very much, Adam, for sharing your
Thank
experience
you.
as well. I'm sure that's really helped a lot of the people listening today. And if anyone does have any questions and wants to explore more about mental performance, yeah, please just drop me a message on Twitter, and I'm very happy to have a chat.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we are going to sign off. Have a good day, everyone.